If I was going to start all over in 2025 as an author, here's what I would do differently than what I did when I started. I sold my first novel back in 2002, and I have published more than 85 books with a lot of the big publishers as well as self-published in the years since. This is actually my 50th book award from HarperCollins, which is one of the publishers that I have worked for. And the market has changed dramatically since then. So you've got to approach it in a slightly different way. Or do you? Because the advice that I give on this channel is pretty much the same no matter what path you're going to take. If you choose to self-publish or you choose to traditionally publish, you should still be writing what you love, what you are passionate about, what you could write 50 of. It was probably one of the best pieces of advice I got early in my career. Can you imagine writing 50 of these? And literally, I have. It was inconceivable to me at the beginning. But when the readers really started picking up and loving what I wrote, they wanted more. And so did my publishers. And if you're self-publishing, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to see that this particular genre is taking off for you. And you'd be smart, obviously, to put your efforts and your energy behind more of that genre. But if it's not a genre that you love, you're not going to be happy. And then it's going to be drudgery. It's going to be work that you don't want to do because you're thinking, oh, I've got to write another one of those books. So choose what you love first. And number two, that will really show on the page. If you love what you're doing, you're going to give that little bit of extra effort to it. Because writing is not easy. Despite what you may watch or hear from other writing instructors or other writers, it is not easy to write a really good book. And it shouldn't be. Because if it was easy, everybody would do it and everybody would be successful. And there is a big learning curve in learning how to write a good book. And that's okay. That's part of the process. And I personally think there needs to be a big learning curve because when somebody sits down to read one of my books, they're giving me hours of their life. And I don't know about you, but every hour in my life is pretty important. I got kids, I have a spouse, I have a job, I have things going on, I have things that are vying for my attention that are very important to me. And if I'm going to choose to take those hours and not spend them with people I love or my friends or my job and give them to a book, that book better be worth it. And that's what I mean about you really need to do your work. You really need to write an excellent book. So those two things have not changed. You should write what you love and you should write a really, really good book. What has changed since I first started is the amount of information available out there. There are channels all over the place. There are books all over the place, like Writing Compelling Fiction, and lots of other books that are available to help teach you how to write. There are mini courses, there are long courses, there are short videos, there are long videos, there are blogs, there are tons of things out there, which can be great, but not all advice is equal. If you look at the people that you are learning from, you should start with their bio. Don't start with their advice. Start with their bio, because there are a lot of people out there trying to teach you how to write who actually haven't written or haven't been successful at their writing. And do you really want to learn from somebody who hasn't been successful at it? Because what is that going to do for you? That is going to teach you what doesn't work. You want to learn from somebody who has been very successful at what they're doing, who has published more than one book, who has published in more than one area, who has years of experience and who has put all that on the page and is able to share it and tell you what they do. So start with their bio. You can look at mine right there in the description and you can see what I have done and whether I have the knowledge to teach you how to write. The other major difference nowadays from when I started is social media. Social media was just in its infancy as my career was starting to take off, and it really wasn't the powerhouse that it is today. It is a big part of every one of our lives. And yes, it is hard to make a dent in social media. I know that. I've got a YouTube channel, and I've been working on this for a year and a half trying to get it to make a dent in a very crowded marketplace. It's not easy, but it gives you access to readers in ways that you never had before. When I first started, all that I had was a website and an email newsletter, and then any events that you would do. So we would go and do book signings, we would go and do talks and things like that. They weren't super well attended. Book signings in general are a hit or miss thing because sometimes you'll sell 2 books, sometimes you'll sell 200 books. I've had both experiences at events that I have done. The email newsletter, back then, people didn't get as much email, so they were read better. I had a much better open rate back then than I do now. The advantage to having social media nowadays is that I found that readers really like to know about my life. They like to know what I'm cooking for dinner, if I live in a small town like I created, if I'm married to a man like the man that I create on the page. Now, my books are not a mirror from my life. There's a whole thing about fiction and it being from my imagination and it being about that character, not about me. But there's a little bit of me in every single character in every single book. And readers like that little peek behind the curtain. So that is what social media allows you to do in a much bigger platform than you would with just an email newsletter. The other advantage that you have nowadays that I did not have as much of back when I started is the volume of authors that you can read from and the amount of things that you can use to study these books. I read 100 or 150 books in my genre before I even thought about writing one. Nowadays, there's so much more available, and you can study both the good ones and the bad ones. Now, yes, I do believe that life is too short for bad books, so I don't waste my time on a bad book. But if I start a book and I'm like, ugh, don't really like this, I don't think I'm going to finish it, before I close it, I analyze, why don't I want to finish this? What am I not connecting with here? What is turning me off from this book? There have been 2 books that I've read recently, both of which I did not finish. One had way too much backstory. The book was probably 100 pages too long, and it just went on and on and on. And while I cared about the character in the beginning and I wanted to see the mystery solved, I didn't care enough after 20, 30 pages of backstory to stay with the book. And so I figured, I'll just skip it. Then there was another one where the story was wrapped up way too soon, and then I just skipped to the very end to see if anything else happened, and nothing else happened. So the conclusion came 30, 40 pages too early. And so then you've got 30 or 40 pages where the author's just trying to fill her word count. Look at those things from other authors that don't really connect with you and learn how to not do that. If you see that somebody has way too much backstory and that's what's turning you off from the book, then go analyze how much backstory you have in your book. How many pages of it do you have? Has it been triggered by the plot? Is it just there just because you feel like you have to get it on the page? If it doesn't answer those questions, then you need to take it out or work it in a different way. The other thing I would do if I was starting my career from scratch this year is not only have a blueprint for where I want to go, which is something I talk about in another video, but I would also have a plan for how I'm going to get myself through that blueprint. This is a very soul-sucking, insecurity-creating industry. It really is, because you're putting your book out there for people to give you 1-star reviews or for editors to reject you. And there's a lot of doubt between once upon a time and the end. There's a whole lot of doubt that happens in there. When you have this plan, okay, I want to finish this book by the end of 2025 and publish it in March of 2026 or whatever your plan is, you also need a plan for how you're going to nurture the writer within. How are you going to keep yourself going on those days when you don't want to write? How are you going to get over those doubts? How are you going to build up your inner strength? I believe deeply in positive thinking and manifestation. And I'm not going to dive super deep into this in this video. One of the things that I did way back in the beginning was I wrote my ultimate career goal on a piece of paper and put it over my computer and kept it there and looked at it every single day. I wanted to be published by a certain publisher. I wanted to have a book out, and I wanted to hit the New York Times list, and I wanted to hit all of the other bestseller lists. I had all of these goals throughout my career that seemed impossible. They really did. It seemed like, really? You want to hit the New York Times list? How is that going to happen? I didn't worry about the how. I didn't worry about the when. I just concentrated on writing the best possible book. And when I sat down at the page and I was feeling doubt, I would go back and reread some of the other stuff that I had written, and I would find proof of concept, which is proof that I can write. Every single author that I work with has some part of it that I am just like, yes, this is exactly what you did right. That is proof of concept that you can write. And if you have a whole lot of pages of stuff that don't work, but you have this great paragraph, then build on that great paragraph. Don't worry about the 5 pages you have to throw away. There are days when you have to throw away 5 pages. It happens. You have a proof of concept that you can actually write, and focus on that, on the good things that you know how to do, the skills that you do have, the story that you love, the words that you love. Allow that proof of concept to keep you going on the days when you're like, oh my gosh, this whole book is a piece of crap. I also want you to think about what you want to be and how that person would act. How do professional authors act? They write at least 5 days a week. They are always looking at their business from a profit and loss standpoint. And that's something that a lot of people don't do when they're dreaming of it and not wanting to be professional. What is making you money? What is going to lose you money? What are you good at? What should you outsource? If you want this to become your 9-to-5 income, you have to treat it like a business, because the people that pay your 9-to-5 income are treating their business like a business. They're looking at what's making us money, what's not. How are we going to put more resources here and less resources there? How are we going to hire somebody for this and not for that? Those are all the things that you should be doing. If you're not good at cover design, and frankly, most writers aren't, then spend the money for a really professional cover design. If you are not good at formatting, and most writers are not, then spend the money on a professional formatter. If you want to be a professional author, you have to act, look, and come across as a professional author. Don't skimp on any of these very vital parts of editing, cover design, formatting, any of that. You're going to have a budget for it, because that's how a business operates. A business sets aside a budget for product creation and launching, and you should have a budget for that as well. If you want to publish with a traditional publisher, then you need to look at who you want to be with. What company do you really want to write for? What agent do you really want to work with? And is that agent somebody that you think could represent you in the long haul? You've got to look at it from a professional standpoint Not just, I love to write, I can't wait to write, I want to write a book. That's the part that keeps you showing up at the page, but that's not necessarily the part that makes you money every single day. Treating it like a business makes it a business that makes you money. And finally, you never say you learned enough. I'm still learning things every single day that I write. I'm still learning how to do this better or that better, or how to plot better, or how to do this better. It's a lot of what I'm sharing on the channel with you guys, but I have never gotten to the point where I thought, there's no way this can be better, or there's no way that I need an editor. I have an editor for every single book I produce. Every single book, because an editor is an outside pair of eyes that will make it better. Now, when I get that revision letter, am I super happy to see that there were things wrong with the book? Absolutely not. I'm crushed actually for a few hours, and I'm just like, what? They didn't like my baby? What was wrong with it? I thought it was beautiful. But then I take a step back and I'm like, okay, the whole goal of the editor is to help me make a book that is going to connect better with readers. And if I do A, B, and C, it's going to do that. That's treating this like a professional author. So if you want to become an author in 2025, start thinking like an author, start acting like an author, and start planning like an author. And if you want more on how to plot your book so that you can get started writing, check out this video right here, because that gives you a framework that you can grow from with your book.